Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City of Bettendorf Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Monday, September 18th, 2023. It's 5 o'clock p.m. Thank you all for joining us. We have an operational item on tomorrow night's agenda for our consideration this evening. And for that, we welcome our Assistant City Administrator and Director of Economic Development, Mr. Jeff Ryder.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Members of Council, appreciate the opportunity this evening. What I want to discuss with you tonight is a resolution approving an amended and restated development agreement with our friends at Middle and Forest Grove LLC and FG80 Holdings LLC. Now, you
Let's put that up. Do we want it on there? Oh, way to go, Denise.
Thank you, Denise. Now, you may recall in February of 22, the city and the developers in question entered into an agreement to construct and develop the property east of Middle Road and north of Forest Grove for complementary uses to the TBK Bank Sports Complex. That original agreement was consummated by council on February 15th of 22. This development agreement contemplates the development of the property still east of Middle and north of Forest Grove. It's a unique amendment in that there's a lot of public benefit and substantially, I'm on a writer's strike, sorry, Your Honor. Substantially, the benefits to the developer are there, but they're dually benefits to the city, and it's unique, and I'll explain why here in just a moment. As you may recall, the original agreement contemplated the construction of an outdoor multi-use turf field complex and a golf entertainment venue of approximately 45 acres, with 25 acres plus or minus being developed, with the remaining 13 acres being held for future development. Now, that doesn't add up to 45 acres. Obviously, that remaining net acreage is undevelopable land. You know, its topography is bad, wooded area just doesn't, it just can't be developed. The amended agreement contemplates the construction of a 100,000 square foot building with indoor turf fields for year-round use, including many sports such as baseball, softball, soccer, football, lacrosse, etc. The developer is really tapping some new markets, one of those being lacrosse, which is very large in the Chicagoland. This facility will be in addition to the construction of the golf entertainment venue that's already under construction. This is the most tangible change, I would say, to the agreement, in that they are suggesting the removal, if you will, of the outdoor fields and the construction of an indoor facility in lieu of those fields. The reconfigured tract of land will allow for that original 13 plus or minus developable acres to actually grow to approximately 37 plus or minus acres for future development, which adds tremendous opportunity for more commercial projects and greater property values and future tax base. So that's kind of one of those unique opportunities that I had suggested earlier. By virtue of the construction schedule associated with this new indoor facility and the city's continued pursuit of funding to support our pedestrian bridge, a couple of following amendments have been included in this restated agreement. Originally, the city had a completion date of January 1 of 2025 for our pedestrian bridge. We have solicited many avenues, many agencies, many entities for support through grants and other capacities to help with this project. It's been a little bit of a challenge. We've gone all the way to the federal level for support, and it's just been very difficult. But what this does is, this agreement and restating it will allow us until January 1 of 2026 to complete that pedestrian bridge. Allows us an opportunity to look at future funding opportunities, but also to realize the benefit of what I'll talk about here as part of the 75-25 TIF split, where we can really project what sort of funding may be available to construct this bridge through the TIF increment that the development is going to generate. As a second term, the developer will have until December 31 of 2024 to complete the indoor facility. I think it's obvious at this point to realize that they're not going to be able to construct a facility by December 31 of 2023, which was the original thought with the outdoor fields. We're 3 months away from that timeline, and that just will not happen. So there's a mutual benefit here. We have another year. They have an additional year. And both parties, we believe, are on the right path to develop this in harmony with each other. The terms relative to the commencement dates of incentives and TIF rebates will run with the amended and restated construction schedules as well. So as you will see in your packet, the dates have in essence been backed up a year to reflect the construction of that indoor facility. It's really no surprise. You know, we're backing that up a year. The TIF increment will start a year later. Due to the lack of the appetite by the state of Iowa, both the city and the developer also agreed that it's really no longer necessary to include any language relative to an Olympic-sized competition swimming pool. We were heavily pursuing this when we started the negotiations on this development agreement, you know, roughly 2.5 years ago. Whenever there was the potential for that to be considered through restructured state programs, things like that. It's just not something that we believe, both on our side and the developer's side, that is necessary to reflect in this development agreement this time. It's just one of them things. So I put in here some what about questions. I figured there's probably going to be some questions, and I wanted to try to walk through some of them in hopes of answering any that the council may have. First off, what about incentives? Are there any further incentives being requested as part of this amended development agreement? No, the financial terms will remain the same. The incentive package is the same. No additional dollars or support are being requested, nor would we consider them. So the terms are the same. What about connectivity to the pedestrian bridge? Will this new facility impact the trails and connectivity? No. Staff has worked very, very closely with the developer, and we really wanted to make sure that we maintain the integrity of our trail system. So that was something that we worked through all of the concepts to make sure that there is going to be pure connectivity along our trail system with our trail system, and there's actually going to be green space and a plaza on the private development that really complement what it is that they're doing and we are going to be doing with that pedestrian bridge. What about this term that cites temporary roads for ancillary work? Why is this language now being added to the amended development agreement? If you may have driven out there and seen, there's a temporary road just north of Quick Star. To better assist with the construction of that fourth roundabout on Middle Road there at Quick Star, the developer had land north of Quick Star to construct a temporary road. This land was greatly necessary to provide the most expeditious construction of that roundabout. That project was originally scheduled to be built in 2 phases and completed in the spring of 2024. I got a typo in here, but this is now allowing us to construct all 4 roundabouts and get them completed by the end of 2023. So by virtue of that developer working with us to construct a temporary road, we've been able to move that timeline up roughly 6 months, which is obviously something that I think everyone in our community wants to see happen as quickly as possible. The developer incurred those costs for that temporary road and will be reimbursed through the TIF increment, but that money was budgeted. There's no monies that are added. It was all part of our project scope, and we certainly made sure that there's no additional financial burden or impact on the city to construct that temporary road. So that's kind of a strong benefit that's really not that sexy, if you will, but it's allowing us to gain 6 months and get that roundabout open that much quicker.
Question, so why did that need to be put in the agreement?
Originally? Or why did it need to?
Why did it get added down?
Yes, so the developer incurred those costs to construct that road. That was not originally contemplated. We were gonna build this out in 2 phases, and we were going to incur those costs. The developer is incurring those costs now, and we're gonna reimburse him through the TIF for him constructing that road and doing it for us, and it's shaving 6 months off of the timeline. So that's what the term was added to the agreement. So the benefits of this agreement, I stated it was kind of unique. It's beneficial to both parties, and I think Mr. Hunt, Mr. Morlock, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schatt will all attest that whenever we had this original concept meeting with the developer, I was probably a little standoffish, for lack of a better term, with our friends on the development team. Because my first thought was, from an optics perspective, those fields being along I-80 were gonna be a huge draw. And that's kind of the excitement. And I wanted them to really sell us on the notion of what an indoor facility was gonna do for the city of Bettendorf in lieu of fields. Through our discussions, we have notated in the development agreement, I haven't put it on here, but there's gonna be aesthetics that match the golf amenity and the TBK to make it complementary. Obviously, by the height of the golf amenity that's going up, you can see that it's not gonna be impacted anywhere in any way, shape, or form by an indoor facility. It's a very substantially high and very impactful structure. So that really lessened my angst, if you will. But then also these benefits are more tangible and really helped us see that the benefits financially to the city of Bettendorf. The first one is beneficial in both regards, both for the city and the developer. Year-round playability in a new indoor facility to complement the TBK Bank Sports Complex, it really is a no-brainer. If you have people coming and playing at that facility all year round as opposed to simply when there's no snow on the ground, we're gonna have more hotel motel tax, more sales tax, more of those $5 room night fees that the city is all gonna get as a component piece of this. An indoor facility will yield a higher taxable valuation than turf ball fields. The construction costs are roughly the same. But an indoor facility, as far as our assessor goes, it's a brick and mortar structure. It will yield a higher assessed value than baseball fields of an outdoor scope. And please remember, when we did this agreement, there's a 75-25 split of that TIF increment. By having higher values out there, and this is only one component piece of what can now be achieved because we have so much more land to develop, we're gonna have 25% of TIF increment that we did not anticipate having before that could help fund that pedestrian bridge without having to go out for much more support. Just a tremendous impact all the way around. And again, that added acreage that we have discussed today is gonna lend itself to more commercial development. We are aware of a large user that is already being courted. Mr. Hunt has a site plan for P&Z to consider that you will see here in the very near future for a building for professional service use that's going to have more taxable valuation that's very substantial. It's just gonna be a tremendous win in that regard. And then more time to complete the pedestrian bridge and more TIF dollars to help support that construction, as I mentioned earlier. And then finally, the completion of those roundabouts that I talked about will be approximately 6 months ahead of the original schedule. We'll be doing this all in a full phased approach as opposed to 2 phases. So we believe, by virtue of this being an indoor facility, there's gonna be a lot more pedestrian traffic, year-round usage, more hotel demand, and a tremendous benefit financially to both the city and the developer to do it in this regard. If you've been out to the TBK Bank Sports Complex, you can see 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds playing indoor sports in the winter, baseball and softball in February. It's pretty unique to see. This is just gonna add to that benefit and that ability to have greater numbers, higher volumes, and service more people on a year-round basis. So I would tell you there's not a lot substantively in this agreement that's changing, other than the big one being we're going from outdoor fields to indoor facility. But there's a lot of benefit that we will be yielding as a city and as a development team on their side by doing this. And we wanted to call this to your attention and request for this amendment to occur tomorrow night.
Any questions for Jeff? Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a couple of concerns, and one is that, excuse me, we've already started the economic development grants, and we're incurring those costs right now, if I understand it right. Those $350,000 annual payments for eight years, we're incurring those now. At the same time, our income to offset that, you know, the hotel motel tax, the sales tax, and property tax, everything is pushed out at least a year before we start getting income back. You know, so I guess I'm concerned that we didn't change the schedule for those economic development grants. My second question is, I'm concerned about what I consider a low minimum assessment number. The new hotel alone is, I think, valued at, what is it, 17 million? and yet we've only got a minimum assessment of only 16 million for the whole project.
So two answers there. The first, I'll answer the second one first. There's actually two sets of assessed values on here. There's the FG80 project and the MFG project. So the one where the hotel is contemplated, that number is set pretty well based on the fact that there's a hotel there in its entirety. That's basically the premise of that minimum assessment amount. The ancillary construction of the other buildings there, that was not contemplated in the assessed value because of the financing necessary the developer needed. A higher minimum assessment of value would have driven his financing capabilities a little bit higher, his percentage rates higher. We set it at that. The other big component piece to this is on the other side, which is the fields, the golf amenity, et cetera. That component piece, as we have seen on the TBK Bank Sports Complex, we set that minimum assessment amount based primarily on the golf amenity. The ancillary fields, to set a minimum assessment amount on that, what we have learned through the TBK Bank Sports Complex is if we set a minimum, generally that is the amount that the assessor uses to base his assessed value. We had $65 million roughly in construction costs on the TBK Bank Sports Complex. And Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that minimum assessment was set at 22 million, give or take.
Right.
Today, the assessed value on the sports complex is roughly 24 million and change. If we set a minimum assessment amount at a certain threshold, our guess and our estimation is that the assessor is going to use that kind of as his Bible or his gospel for setting the assessed value of this property. We don't want to do that because we believe we can yield a higher assessed value by not setting a minimum, which will then in turn benefit us in the long term. If we set a minimum and it comes in exponentially lower than what we had hoped for, we're stuck with it. If we don't set a minimum other than what we feel that the golf complex will generate, we believe we have an opportunity to see higher growth and higher values. And if the developer's here, I know he probably doesn't want to hear that, but we higher by virtue of the fact that we don't set a minimum other than on that golf amenity and other than on that hotel. We certainly can, and I think the developer would be willing to do so, but it may just cut us off at the knees and have some unintended consequences that we did not want. Now, the second one, and Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we've yielded or provided any of the $350,000 annually to the developer today.
We have made one of those payments, and the second one would be due to occur after the first of the year, so January of '24. That particular component of the incentive package was never contemplated to come from revenues from the development, but rather we've budgeted for those to come from our gaming revenue fund, at least in these first couple of years, until the revenues do come on. So that's how we've planned that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll take this up as item number 8 tomorrow evening. Let's take a look at the remaining items on consent. Are there any items there any particular council member would like to discuss at this time? Greg?
Thank you, Aaron. Echo E, does that, what do they call it, the cloud-based storage, does that also include the squad car cameras?
Yes, that includes everything. So, yeah, WatchGuard, that includes squad cars, any video, body cameras, squad cars, interviews.
So you're not having to store VHS tapes anymore?
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's all cloud. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank
That's
you,
the
Ron.
getaway. Right now, we're doing it on site, and we want to, for many reasons, get it off site in the cloud.
Thank you, Chief.
Other items on consent any council member would like to discuss or have a question about at this time? I'd like to entertain a motion that all items remain on tomorrow night's consent agenda for consideration.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Yeah, we only do the consent ones because the consent can be moved over. We don't have to. Thank you. Always helping me out. Any other items to be added by council? I'll have a little update on last week's MRCTI trip that I can send to you a different way and get that organized, but anything else to be added? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We stand adjourned. Good work, people. Tomorrow, those